Lucy and Colin, us from Victorian, especially my function. I'm just going to introduce myself first. I'm Zarah. I'm trying to organise the United Workers Union now. My work is really focused on engaging members around impacts, particularly as a health and safety issue, and also direct job security. And I guess what I really want to get out today is that every worker, whether you're a paid worker or not, is impacted by climate change, whether you work indoors or outdoors, on your way to work and on your way home from work. Many of our members, and I also have to say that we cover 45 different industries, so we have a lot of members across like care industries, warehousing, dairy, poultry, all across the services industries where we're income members. Health and safety directly impacts our members' health and safety, particularly in summer around heat, and trying to organise around climate change as a health and safety issue is the best way that we've been able to engage our members. As we've heard today around heat and sustainability, heat exhaustion in the summer, and stroke in the summer, we've already unfortunately lost like our members, but it's just like sorry. Our member, we have an incarceration history for the last 2 years, so this is what we're up against. Job security is a major issue for our workers, particularly in dairy, food processing, agriculture, with the food prices. I mean, we don't know like how the longevity of that industry is with climate change. Climate disasters are also a huge threat to our members. Job security and health and safety, during the Black Summer bushfires, we had members growing up who had spoken to their warehouses and their workplaces were filling with water from floods, and they're still recovering. We really can be better climate clauses and agreements and pay disaster with the national climate standards, so no one has to choose between their income and their work and their health and safety when it comes to climate change. So I just want to give us just a bit of a brief about the work that I'm doing, but I also really want to introduce the speakers today. We have Colin, who is a Just Transitions Organiser at Victorian Trades Council and a board member of several earth worker cooperatives. He's engaged in climate, energy, and just transitions, and organising and policy work for the trades unions in Victoria, nationally and internationally. And we have Catherine Strong, Associate Professor at RMIT Music Industry Program. Catherine works in the Music Industry Program at RMIT. She researches extensively on industry work conditions, gender in music, and popular music as heritage. She has worked with Victorian Music Development Office, APRA, and COS, among other industry bodies, to produce research on current conditions in music work in Australia, and is a researcher for the Encore project, which helps women and GNC people return to the music industry after a break. She is also committed to climate activists and researches how music will be impacted by the climate emergency. So I'd really love to get you both discussing more about your work with workers across your sectors. I might just go to Colin now.
Thanks, Zarah, and thanks for the opportunity, and great to see you here today. As Zarah said, I work on just transitions for Victorian Trades Hall, but I also have roles at the national and international level as well. I'm going to take a bigger picture perspective really on what climate change means for work and workers. And I want to start by making it very clear, as most of you probably know, but it's becoming more clear every day, that the interests of capital are anathema largely to the interests of workers, as much as their interests of capital are anathema to a safe climate. This is becoming more and more clear every day. We essentially have a predatory capitalist system operating now. It's becoming very clear in the US how predatory this actually is, and it's terribly frightening that Peter Dutton wants to be an antipodean sort of mini-me Trump, which I think is very frightening because there's a real chance the prick will be elected at some stage this year. So the chance of predatory capital being unleashed on us in Australia is very real over the next period. It's very clear to me if you look at various strands of what capital is up to at the moment, and you can see how they affect workers and the climate. So the rise of AI. AI is a great threat to the workforce and many workers. It's also a massive threat to climate. The amount of energy required for AI is phenomenal. So that's one. You also have let me give you an example from an international level. I've done some work on decarbonisation of the construction industry at an international scale. When I was talking to European trade unions last year about just transitioning the construction industry in Europe, they basically said that we don't have much time to think about just transition and decarbonisation of the construction industry, because there is so much exploitation in our construction industry. There is so much subcontracting all the way down to there you go. Maybe, am I not
just comes in and out of it.
a bit in and out.
If I speak loud, I can't go much closer, but there you go. There's so much subcontracting of the construction industry that gets found, and you get this gross undermining of labour standards and security of employment. You get the employment in the end all the way down the supply chain to exploited migrant labour who have complete fear of raising any questions or issues because they'll get sacked, they'll be deported, all sorts of those problems. So that makes it very difficult to engage with workers. Well, I just speak loudly.
Sorry.
I'll speak loudly, I'll put my union voice on.
All right, so you get this real problem when workers are scared to speak up for various reasons. Then they don't believe that a just transition is possible because they don't have a voice. So the fundamentally important thing for unions is to give workers a voice. And in Australia, until recently, there have been some improvements in labour law in Australia recently, but for a long time, Australia has had some of the worst industrial relation laws in the world, or in the OECD, in relation to trade unions, and that really hinders unions being able to represent workers, to give them a voice in the transition. The other, I think, thing that's really important to note is that if we're going to transition our economy, there is no there's some transition occurring, but not a lot, to be real. But we need a huge number of workers to build the infrastructure for renewable energy, to decarbonise houses and other buildings. We need a lot of electricians, plumbers and others. We will likely face a shortage of electricians at least, probably other skilled workers. So the very first thing we should be doing is saying we can't be distracting from the task of having a qualified, trained workforce to work on renewable energy by getting electricians and so on working on new fossil fuel projects. It's insane. So the very least thing we should be doing is saying there can't be any new fossil fuel projects, not just for climate reasons, but we need those workers. We can't have them doing that work when we need them to be building the renewable energy and to be decarbonising our buildings. There are other aspects where you see clearly the interests of capital versus the interests of workers around workplace rights, safety, and also climate change. I would say nuclear is one of these as well. So Dutton is pushing nuclear. There are some people who are pushing nuclear. It's very clear the nuclear stuff that Dutton is pushing is extraction in many ways, and it's a way to keep coal and gas in the system as long as possible. But nuclear also poses a significant risk to communities, but also to workers. Even if there are no nuclear accidents, the level of ionising radiation around nuclear power stations is much higher than the safety level, the safe levels for most people. And in countries where they have nuclear power stations, where there aren't even accidents taking place, there are still health impacts from nuclear power, most of them in the local communities, but particularly on the workers working in those power stations. Maybe I'll just try and conclude with a few positive things that we should be trying to work towards. I think we should be desperately working as a union movement, but as a community as well, towards reduction in working hours. So I think we should be working initially towards a 30-hour week. I think that would have a significant benefit for workers and potentially a significant benefit in reducing carbon emissions if we get fewer people having to travel for work and so on. And we get a focus away from the idea of continually producing, continually consuming and growing the economy. So that's time for one positive suggestion. My main point is union rights are vital and labour rights are vital to action on climate change, and we really have to defend and grow union and labour rights if we're going to tackle climate change in any real sense. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I think that sort of sets the scene really nicely for me doing like a bit of a deep dive into like a specific industry and some of the ways in which these questions about capital and labour, about what is going to happen to a workforce when climate change really, starts to hit more and more and more. So basically, looking at the music industry in particular, and a lot of the things though that I have to say that this would apply broadly across the creative industries as well. So the music industry is like a fairly unregulated, certainly not very unionised, very informal sort of place of work. And this means that in a lot of ways it is invisible in terms of some of the things that play out within that area. First of all, it's been a fairly recent thing only for people to think about music as a workplace. And so questions about like conditions, what it is like to be part of this industry, some of the ways in which workers are harmed by this industry, and there are a lot. Like it is actually not a very healthy workplace in a whole lot of different ways in terms of people being exploited, in terms of there being a lot of abuse, bullying, sexual harassment, those sorts of things, poor work conditions, and obviously I think everybody here probably already knows, musicians and people who work in the music industry incredibly poorly paid, so people aren't even sort of getting recompensed very well for what they do. And I think that a lot of this sort of stems back to the fact that when you have people doing something because they love it, unfortunately you immediately create conditions where the exploitative sort of capitalist system that we live within, it extracts that passion in the same way as it extracts things from the earth. The extractivist nature of capitalism works on people's love in the same way as it works on other things, and that is why you sort of have these conditions that mean that people are not well cared for. So in much the same way as the fact that it is a workplace has been overlooked, the fact that the music industry is going to be impacted by climate has also been something that is like really weirdly invisible to people. The federal government put out a new cultural policy 2 years ago called Revive, and that cultural policy mentioned climate once in the context of talking about a project that an arts community group had done that was looking at climate. There was nothing in there at all that talked about the impact of climate on the creative industries. So nobody's thinking about like what is going to happen. They are starting to think about it now. And the lens through which they have started to think about it is music festivals. So this is the work that I've been doing with some colleagues of mine. A couple of us sat down a couple of years ago and just put together a list of music festivals that had been cancelled over the last sort of 15 years, and the reasons why they've been cancelled. number that have been cancelled because of natural events, because of natural disasters, has been like going like that, right? And I think a lot of people would have heard about this. So they've been being affected by bushfires, they've been flooded out, just wild weather sort of coming through, mean things that have to be cancelled. And this is sort of like woken people up a little bit to the fact that for some reason, because you are doing a creative activity, it does not make you immune to what is happening in the physical world around you, and that actually maybe we should start thinking about this. So the work that we've been done has been sitting down with people who run music festivals, who work at music festivals, councils that are involved in putting them on, getting some information about what people are starting to think about. And it's a place where people have a lot of really creative ideas. So people are starting to workshop ideas like, how do we share resources? How do we share information? Like, how do we work out what the best practice is to make sure that that we are safe, that our workers are safe, that the people who are attending these events are safe. But what they are running up against is, again, the nature of being within the music industry is being constantly timed for, money for, doing everything by the seat of your pants, and on like tiny budgets a lot of the time, unless you're attached to something like Live Nation, and let's just not get into that because that's a whole other thing. But it's people who are always at the limits of what they can do, sort of being asked to add in this extra thing, and then also coming up against things like, you know, we know that one of the groups that are most attuned to how horrible this thing with the climate is going to be are insurance companies. So music festivals are finding it harder and harder to get insurance. And some of them are saying that it's the thing now that is going to be the difference between them going ahead and not going ahead, because they just can't afford to pay what they're asking. So I think that these things together sort of point to the way in which what is happening with the climate is going to slowly strip away the things in our society and in our lives that we love. And we're not going to see that coming. And the people who are employed in these industries are going to find it harder and harder to get work. The people who are in these industries who have easily transferable skills are already skipping out. So it's one of those sort of compounding impact situations where it's not just one thing going on, there's a multitude of things going on, but when you put them all together, you just start to see things like, where have all the festivals gone? And nobody still is talking about those climate impacts when it comes to other parts of the industry, like what happens to small venues when we start to get more and more days that are above 40 degrees. Like, they can't open and run. Like, often they don't have things like good air conditioning to make sure that people are going to be safe. So we are going to start to see venues close, we're going to start to see people dying at events because people weren't thinking properly about what the risks were. And we are definitely going to see, you know, the impacts on the music workforce. Like, you know, what is it like to be a musician and to be earning a pittance and to be told, well, you've still got to get up on that stage even though it's 40 degrees and do your set. And, you know, the conditions that people are going to be working under there are also going to start to get harsher and harsher as well. And one of the climate scientists that's working on this project with us just likes to say over and over again to us, the reason this is important is because one of the places where we build resilience and where we build the resilience that we are going to need to get through what's coming is in places like the arts, it's in places like music festivals, it's in places where we come together and we share these things that sort of are part of what makes us human and things that we can connect to one another. And if we don't put our eye on what is happening in those areas and do the adaptation work that means that they are going to be able to continue to do what they do, but hopefully like also find a way to like stop the extractivist nature to get the capitalist sort of stuff out of it, like make it more sustainable for everybody. And like we could talk about that for a long time. Until we start doing that, like there's a real risk that something really fundamental and important is just going to sort of slowly wither away and we're not going to realise until it's gone. So, yeah. Catherine and Colin. I think that's really well said, and it also points to like during the climate crisis and the ways that our individualistic society has created this event that workers are always bear the brunt of climate impacts and these like injustices, and also the way we the casualization of our jobs, the lack of job security. We're really we're trying our best to think what does a sustainable future look like? What does a climate job look like? What does a good paid, a well-paid, secure job with a future look like? And why workers always need to be consulted and at the front of these tables when we're talking about transitions. And we're not also just looking at fossil fuel workers and renewable energy manufacturers in the transition. All of our jobs matter and all of our jobs will change. So I would love to get some questions from us today.
Hi, I just wanted to contribute two things. Because weirdly, I really like working with you. So I used to be a musician, and I think another thing that people need to think about is most musicians' bread and butter is teaching. And I've seen from top private schools to universities whacking as many music teachers, like individual music tuition teachers, into 1x1, 2x1 concrete rooms, flat walls, no soundproofing. We all like to wear earplugs, and it's like a hotbox. Just raising that as something that might be worth to add to your information about climate adaptation. And then I currently work in the trades. I work in gardening and landscaping, open space maintenance, and it is in TAFE we are taught the Australian standards. We are taught how to do things to basically make a better climate well. The councils, no client ever wants to pay for doing things right, doing things properly, making sure trees survive, which are going to do carbon storage, taking care of soil, doing proper signage. We spray harmful pesticides and herbicides. And we also have terrible implementation across many of our companies. And I acknowledge that that's probably because of neoliberalism and private companies and the diminishing in-house groups that used to exist at a lot of places that work to have. But yeah, I just think I want to contribute that this is an area that's supposed to be full of green workers, horticulture and agriculture, and the only company I've ever seen and experienced doing good work is Citywide. And when Citywide and it seems to me whenever I talk to a Citywide worker, they never know that next year they're going to keep their contract with, say, City and Melbourne Council, because City and Melbourne Council would rather go to Serco as a cheaper contractor. And Serco, of course, has had a pretty dodgy history in the prison system and security system. So I just think, I really agree that we need to build this union movement, but I just also just wanted to throw out there that this supposed green industry is bullshit. And the most common union in our industry is the Australian Workers' Union. Why doesn't it do that?
Well said.
Yeah, there was a lot in that. Looking at the double intensification, the double intensification of exploitation. So I'm just trying to pull out what you're saying of people and environment. I was thinking of something Dave Caron from Earthworker back in the day used to use a slogan called post-consumer unionism. That the idea that work isn't just about more money for more staff. Do you have a comment on that? How that shift is going or can exist within the aims of unions and how they organise for what their claims are, or something beyond that?
I'm glad you asked that. It is something that I've been involved with Earthwork from the outset and deeply engaged with Earthworkers, several cooperatives, which Victorian Trades Hall supports, by the way. And I think what those cooperatives are is beyond what they do, which make hot water systems and draft-proof homes and build things. And we have a co-owner of CoPower with the United Workers Union and a whole lot of other organisations. Electricity retailer, join up if you want to. We'd have good product placement there. What we're trying to do with those organisations is talk about the democratisation of work, what is the purpose of work, giving workers and communities a real sense of ownership of how they make a living, and thinking about the broader impact of work on the planet, which we're trying to do. But I have to tell you, it is hellishly hard. Earthworkers struggles relentlessly with, people for a start, people don't, banks and financial organisations just don't understand cooperatives. It's hard to raise capital. It's actually very hard to make money in the economy at the moment with high interest rates for things like hot water systems and so on. So it's a relentless struggle for cooperatives in a capitalist economy, but it's still worth the struggle in trying to create a sense of work can have a different function than just make as much money as you can so you can buy as many things as you can.
And on the movement in general, that kind of aim at it not just being about more money for more stuff. I guess the co-ops are a symbol of what could be possible, but beyond that, in the broader movement, anybody's or anything.
Well, I mean, Zarah can tell you this better than I can. The members that the United Workers Union represents, a lot of farm workers, a lot of warehousing workers and workers in industries that are not earning a huge amount of money. It's not as if they're, nurses, teachers, I don't think they're overpaid. And in the middle of I think people are experiencing serious cost of living pressures. The cost of housing in this country is obscene. The price of energy has gone up substantially, all sorts of other things. I don't think, a lot of workers are not doing it easy. So.
I think that the example of creative industries is, that term is like problematic, but this question of like, why are you doing work? I think that what's going on there also illustrates the problem, as I was saying, about like what happens when you are doing work for reasons other than wanting to just buy more things. Like when you're doing it just because you want to do it. But that opens up all of these other avenues by which people are taking advantage of. And finding out how you value things that are sort of inherently valueless or not able to have a price put on them in the system that we exist in a way that means that workers can have sort of dignity, good working conditions and be looked after, is just a problem that nobody is grappling with. I mean, people are grappling with it, but not in a systematic or a way that's bringing about much change at the moment. So you've got something, people are talking about UBIs for artists, not a UBI if it's just for artists, but a version of a UBI that is focused on artists, sort of moves towards doing things like making venues cooperatives, having them be owned by government and run in a non-profit, not-for-profit way. You've got the City of Melbourne, for instance, won't let artists, won't employ artists without having like a bottom level fee, $250 per person. You get a lot of pushback about that within the industry because like a venue will then turn around and tell you that will make them go bankrupt if you make them actually pay artists like a proper amount of money. So you're up against all of those sorts of things. So I think like exchange of ideas around some of like the way these things play out very differently in different places. In regards to that question about value and why people are doing what they're doing and how those things like intersect to create these very specific outcomes for different industries is a thing, I guess. Interesting.
It does raise the issue of universal basic services, though, doesn't it? So we should be improving the level of service provision that people get, like free universal healthcare, actually free education, doesn't really exist in this country. Things like that, and maybe other services that should really be free, like internet. I mean, it's an essential service, and that should be free. Things like that. And much reduced energy prices. I mean, Australia pegs our gas and black coal prices to the international market. Why? Why do we do that? It's just inflation. And the national electricity market is just an inflation transmission belt. For European energy prices into Australian energy prices. Why do we do that?
I guess I can try and answer a little bit of that question as well, as we're thinking about like how jobs are going to have to change and working, but I guess also talking about the fossil fuel industry and a lot of our industries in the United Workers Union, which are highly feminised in the care industry as well, we're going to have to be really rethinking about the work that we do and those attitudes towards work. What would it take for a fossil fuel worker to become a care worker? Well, a lot of gender dynamics would have to change and they'd have to be paid a lot more. And if we're going to be having a just transition, that means we need a just community transition. We have to be looking at forms of care work and unpaid care and domestic work and education in our communities, and those jobs will change. And we need more jobs, workers in those jobs. But they have to be paid more, they have to have secure jobs, and they have to be valued. The life of work is just going to change. We've already seen a change of technology, tech shifts, for example, casualisation, neoliberalism. What if we make jobs change so they actually suit working people so that we can have a better future? One last question?
Oh, I did have one question. I have a really shitty EVA at 38 degrees, and I work with in central evening strips. So my EVA, our agreement is 38 degrees in terms of when we stop work. And that's actually pretty common in my industry. But I'm trying to research, because when we work on Rhodes, it's a lot hotter because heat service and also humidity. And I'm trying to research for our next round of bargaining a more in-depth one. I just wondered if you had any advice on heat and working outdoors, because it depends on what service you're working with and how hot it is.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there is no temperature where we're told that we have to stop work. You have to kind of fight for it. It's not a law, but if you have an elected HSR that is a union rep at your workplace, it gives you a lot more stronger protections to cease work and to change the way that you work. Your employer should be letting you work out on the tarmac at the hottest part of the day, because it might be 38 degrees, but when you're on this dark surface on this tarmac, that's not 38 degrees. I don't want to know how hot that is. And then the humidity as well. And also that everyone experiences the heat differently. So there are ways that you can change your work and remove the hazard, but you also have to remember that it is the employer's obligation and their responsibility to keep you safe. And often, as we know, that's shifted onto the employee, and that shouldn't be the case. So there's heaps of ways that we can have discussion about how we can organise around that, and I would also say become an HSR, a union HSR, not don't get someone from your work who's an HR, or it should be a union rep.
Yeah, we don't have union representation.
Well, you should be the union representation.
The CFMU construction division has 35 degrees as a knock-off, but there's also provisions, things that are required before you get to that temperature. You should be I don't think you should accept 38 degrees. I think you should be bargaining for lower temperatures. And the fact is, if health and safety is at risk, you are under the health and safety provisions rather than industrial, the industrial law as such. You're entitled to walk off the job. You're entitled to stop work if health and safety is at risk. But just bargain for reduced temperatures. I mean, it's going to be it's going to be an issue because it's going to hit those temperatures more and more, so it's going to have an economic impact, but, you know, big business didn't want to do anything to deal with climate change, so it's their problem now. Less money.
Cool. All right, I think that's we're coming to a close now. But thank you so much for joining us today. And if anyone else has like one closing comment before we finish up here, I'll put it. You can join your union.
Oh, well, yes, absolutely. Join your union. I think we need to be very, very wary about what a Dutton government would mean for Australia in so many ways. Which is not to say I'm not advocating voting for the Labor Party or anything like that, because I think we're all on a solidarity team here, or many of us, that the current federal Labor government's been a great disappointment. So, but Dutton is a real and present risk to so much that we would all stand for. So we've got to be very, very wary about that and organise against it. But in the process of organising against it, it's not just organising to get the ALP elected, it's about organising for a different form of democracy. In the previous section, the previous panel, people were talking about, you know, much deeper forms of democracy, and so I think we've really got to start talking about those things much more, because I think our current liberal democratic, representative democratic system has failed us in so many ways, especially our economy.